Welcome to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast, where we break down the complex and emotional process of divorce into manageable, easy-to-understand steps. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and with me is Bobby Buchanan, widely recognized as one of Illinois' top divorce attorneys, offering unmatched insight and experience in family law. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Illinois Divorce Guide. Wow, I can't even speak. Here we go. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. I'm your host, Greer Howard, and I am here with Bobby Buchanan. Bobby, it's great to be here with you today. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Great to see you, Greer, and great to dive into another episode. I like these ones that are a little bit more, how can we say, practical, action oriented.
Yes, we're gonna go right to the beginning. We're gonna go back to the beginning of divorce and sort of that very first initial meeting with your attorney, and how to find the right attorney that's the right fit for you for your case. And there's a lot that goes into that. And Bobby, we talk a lot about, especially at the beginning of divorce, the emotions can be so charged. It can be a very emotional, difficult time. And, when you're first meeting your attorney, you got to find out, a few things to make sure that the attorney is a great fit. So why don't we kind of start today about that first consultation? So let's say that you have, a new client that's coming in. It's their first time meeting you. What are some things that they could potentially expect on that first meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we talk through this, it's good to recognize where these clients are or potential clients as far as their fears. There's a lot of fear going into this process. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's about to happen. Am I making a huge mistake? And I try to keep that in mind every time somebody calls our office and, um, you know, where we come from as far as our conversation. So what's going to
Why do
happen? Go ahead.
Well, yeah. Why do you feel like that first meeting is so intimidating? Because I think it is. It's so intimidating to come into a first meeting with a potential attorney. Why do you think that is?
I think for most people, that call with the attorney or that meeting with the attorney really represents a pivotal moment in the divorce decision-making process. So a lot of people have probably even said to their spouse, we need to get a divorce, as they've been fighting for the last 6 months, year, 5 years, whatever it is. They've thrown the D word around, but no one has ever actually called a divorce lawyer. So calling a divorce lawyer is a self-admission that this has progressed to a place of quasi no return. Certainly people hire us all the time and then reconcile, or they talk to us and then reconcile. So you can always stop this process. I think that's actually a great point for people to understand, that you can hire a lawyer. Your lawyer can file the initial documents. You can have a judge. You can go in front of the judge. You could even be on the eve of trial and stop the process. The only thing it takes to stop the process is both people agreeing to stop the process. And it's simple as that. No judge is going to say, hey, too late. Went this far. You guys are divorced now. So understand that you can always put the brakes on this process, and you only have to move forward as quickly or as slowly as you feel comfortable. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because, it is like, remembering that, okay, because you're having this consultation, it does mean that, you're probably getting serious about potentially getting a divorce. But I love that you mentioned that at any point, if you decide that you don't want to get divorced, if both parties decide that, you certainly do not have to. And I think when you're going into a consultation, what would you say are a few things that a consultation is versus what a consultation is not?
yeah, absolutely. So a consultation is not a meeting where you're necessarily hiring that attorney immediately. Um, I would say, depending on your situation, unless you have, this divorce lawyer that you're hiring comes from a great referral and you feel an immediate fit, then you might just want to move forward. But interviewing a couple, at least two divorce lawyers to find one that is the right fit, is the best way to go. This isn't necessarily going to be a specific strategy session with the divorce lawyer to decide the entire length of the case and what you're going to do. You're not going to solve every issue. You're not going to build your courtroom strategy. Rather, you're going to get oriented to the process. You're going to be educated on the process. You're going to figure out whether or not this divorce firm or this divorce lawyer is the right fit for you personality wise. And you're just really going to get that high level overview of what's this process like, and then what is the immediate next step, not what's 10 steps down the road, but what is going to happen as soon as I hire this firm, and what should I expect in the next week or so.
Yeah. It's interesting, obviously the client is trying to decide if the lawyer is a good fit. Bobby, for you and your firm, are you often trying to figure out if the client is a good fit for your practice as well?
Absolutely. It's a two-way relationship. And in order for us to have success, and any professional service firm wants to have success with their clients. That's why what we do, that's why we do what we do. But we can't do it with everybody. Sometimes there is not the right fit. And so we have to politely decline those cases or refer them to someone else. We really try to align ourselves with clients that we know we're going to be able to work well with, and then get the best results possible.
Would you say there are any red flags that you've come across that, if a potential client comes in and they're doing one of these things that you sort of know, okay, might not be a good fit?
How much time do you have?
All the time you want, Bobby.
Uh, yeah, I mean, there are loads of red flags, and this goes both ways. I mean, there are loads of red flags for that attorneys do that, clients should be looking out for. I would say one that sticks out in my mind is the client that comes in and is immediately telling you what you need to do and how you need to litigate this case. And that's either because maybe it could be a lot of different reasons. That's their personality and they're just very demanding and bossy, or maybe they've been Googling and they're just very anxious and they're just very controlling, or they've been doing, chat GPT or AI and have the specific idea what needs to happen. Those clients, we cannot engage in a good collaborative relationship with them because they don't have a clear understanding of what is the value they bring and what's the value we bring. I mean, the value we bring is that we have done this for years. We've done this with thousands of clients. We have a very extensive knowledge of the law, of the strategy, of the specific judges. And so developing the right strategy is something that we need to do methodically. And it just doesn't work if we have a client who's firing off saying, we need to send subpoenas to all these banks. We need to file this motion. We need to sanction my spouse for this, or we need to go after them for attorney's fees. That sort of aggressive behavior indicates to us that there's not going to be a lot of flexibility from our client in order to find the right strategy.
Yeah, yeah. And on the flip side of that, for potential clients that are trying to find the right attorney, do you have any, red flags of, hey, if an attorney is acting this way, like run for the hills?
Yeah, I think, if you go see that attorney and they're just talking at you the whole time, and they're almost as like, it's almost the same thing. If you talk to that attorney and right off the bat, they're telling you, we got to send all these subpoenas out, or we got to, they're very almost overly specific in what you should do. That's a red flag because they don't know the whole story yet. And they're just trying to show you that they know their stuff and that they can, fire off these buzzwords, and they're trying to show this level of confidence where in reality, there really shouldn't be that kind of decision making at all in the case. Sure, they could throw out some options or some alternatives, but what they should be doing is pressure testing those or taking your temperature for those and saying, how does that sound? How do you feel about that? Let's talk about the pros and cons of each one of these, because there is no one way to skin a cat. And I don't love that expression, but I couldn't think of a better one. This is as much art as it's science. This is more art than it is science. And so there's a lot of different ways to go about a divorce case. So an attorney that's just saying, this is it, this is black and white, here's what you need to do, bada bing, we're done, is probably just telling you what you want to hear rather than providing some more kind of grounded strategy.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, no one's skinning any cats over here today, Bobby. I love it. So let's talk about maybe, a few things to do to prepare before you go to this consultation, because like you said, you're not going to have everything figured out, right? I mean, do you have to bring every single piece of documentation, or do you just sort of need to have an idea, to kind of let your attorney know, your personal situation and what it's looking like?
Yeah, people often ask me, what do I need to bring to the consultation? Do I need my marriage certificate? That sort of thing. No, you don't. And you don't even need any documentation whatsoever. You just need to have a mental snapshot of the important parts of the marriage. I think of it in three buckets. So you're going to want the relationship bucket, and that's going to be knowing when you got married. That's helpful, but that's not even key. And certainly a lot of people call the office and we ask them, well, when were you married? And they can't remember.
That's
Believe,
a whole nother conversation of why their
yeah,
marriage didn't work, Bobby.
believe it or not. So when were you married? If you've been separated, when did you get separated? The basics about your kids, where they go to school, any major conflicts that have been happening. Usually in the divorce process, there is some key breakdowns of the relationship. So we talk about those. Maybe you started counseling at some point. So we'll talk through that. This is all stuff that you should have top of mind. And then we'll talk about your financial reality. That's bucket number two. Just generally speaking, what kind of assets and debts do you have? What is your income? What's your spouse's income? That general financial picture. And you might not even know all of it. Like we've talked about before, there's a lot of lopsided relationships out there where one side doesn't know the income information or the debt information. There might be a surprise down the road of there's credit card debt you didn't know about. There's tax debt that you didn't know about. Taxes haven't been filed in years and you didn't know about that. Whatever you know is what you can bring, and we'll deal with uncovering the rest down the road. And then the third bucket is those parenting realities. So just talking about who does the regular caretaking of the children. What is your relationship with the children like? Do you actively co-parent with your spouse at this point? What are your kids' special needs, extracurricular activities, that sort of thing? That overview is what we need to know, and 99% of people are going to have that on the ready. But just know you don't need all this documentation at this point.
Yeah, I love knowing that. It's kinda like have that higher level view of it, but you don't have to have all the documents to support it, at this point. So that can help take a little of the overwhelm and be not quite as overwhelming. There's
Yeah.
plenty of time for that throughout the divorce process. And is there anything so specific about, getting divorced in Illinois that, people should understand before they start this process?
Yeah, in Illinois, I think the big thing to understand, one is that this is a no fault state. So really, we try to take the blame out of the divorce process. Some people think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't cast any judgment. It's just a thing as far as I'm concerned because I'm a lawyer. I'm just concerned with what is. So we're not going to go into court blaming one side for infidelity or mental or physical abuse. It could be it could be relevant in another context. The other thing to really focus on, as far as the kids go, the courts are looking at the best interests of the children, the children's stability, what the historical caregiving has been, who's actually been taking care of the kids, and the other aspect of it is that in Illinois, the divorce process can be very long if you're going to litigate it. Other states can really push through a litigated divorce quickly. Not so much in Illinois. It can really drag things out. So we want to focus on how can we resolve this diplomatically in a smart way rather than in kind of an aggressive fighting way. And that way we can get through this process in weeks or months rather than years.
Yeah, I love that. And so, as you're kind of going through this process, let's talk a little bit about how to evaluate whether a lawyer is right for you. What would you say? I mean, obviously, it's okay to interview your, potential attorney here. So, what would be a couple of questions that might be nice to ask as you're trying to see if someone's a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, this really is, you should interview your attorney. At the same time, they're going to want to interview you. And I think a good attorney is one that makes you feel comfortable, knows how to listen to you, can easily, uh, this is all, it's almost like a professional first date. Can you sit down with each other and have a conversation that flows, that builds on each other, and it feels very natural and effortless? So I think that the questions that you can ask your attorney are going to naturally flow from that conversation, but just asking them in general what their experience is, finding out if they're a generalist or if they do specifically divorce is an important one. I'm a big believer, especially if you live near a large city. I mean, if you live more in rural areas, it can be really hard to find a specialist, and you're going to hire a generalist most likely. But if you're in a big city, you need to find a specialist because the other side's going to have one too. And a specialist is much more of an expert on the process than a generalist is.
All right. Now, okay. Now, a lot of people know that, some attorneys, not maybe you, Bobby, but some attorneys can be a little flashy, rocking that nice watch or nice car and all that. And being a flashy attorney does not mean necessarily that they're not a great attorney. I mean, it looks like they've had a lot of success. So, when somebody is evaluating kind of the fit versus the flash, let's kind of break that down a little bit because I mean, flashy isn't necessarily bad. I mean, they've obviously won some cases, but just because they're flashy might not necessarily mean they're the right fit. So there's a couple of different categories that somebody can sort of break down to see. And what would those be for you?
Yeah. So as far as fit, we're going to talk about communication style, their philosophical alignment in this process, and then their whether or not they can be a decision partner in this process. And like you said, that nice watch, that nice car, nice office, nice suit, those could be indicators of success. Like you said, you use the phrase they've won some cases, which I think is a very common thing to say just in general. But we also have to remember that in divorce, defining what is a win is very difficult. And you're not going to be able, I think what's key for people to understand is you're not going to be able to hire a lawyer that can just go in and be a pit bull and get you whatever you want. And you have to be wary of those types of attorneys as well, because they can actually take more than they get you. They can charge massive attorney's fees and not get you across the finish line. And if you are blinded by the fact that they're wearing a nice watch, driving a nice car, etc., and you think, well, they must know what they're doing, then that could steer you down the wrong road. So forget, you know, and we could also talk about, well, do you want to hire the lawyer that clearly hasn't bought a new suit in 20 years? Man, there's something to be said for that. I'm just much more of a pragmatic type of person. I don't really care what people wear when I'm hiring someone. I want someone to look, you know, um, put together, and that's all that's really important to me. If you're overly flashy, that's personally going to be a turnoff, but maybe not for you. I think we got to get below that and look at the substance here. So, do they explain things clearly? Do they listen to you? Are they able, like I said before, able to make you feel comfortable? And can you really have a back and forth with each other and feel like you can work collaborative with each other? And then the second aspect is that like their philosophical approach to the divorce process. So, are they a litigation first attorney, or do they try to be diplomatic and resolve things out of court? Do they like to build relationships, or do they tend to burn bridges with their communication style? Those are some key aspects that you want to align yourself with as well. And then finally, are they able to clearly educate you on the process and bring you into the decision-making process so you really feel like you can make decisions with them and that you both can stay aligned and trust each other through the process? Because the trust is such a huge part of hiring a lawyer, because you're going to come to a place in your divorce where the lawyer is saying you really probably should concede on this point, or it's not worth fighting over this extra amount of money. And you have to trust your lawyer in order to just get across the finish line.
Okay. All right. So, Bobby, let's say you have two attorneys, and one promises that they're going to be really aggressive in the courtroom, and they're going to get you that victory, which we just said that maybe we're not supposed to look at it that way. And then the other says that they're going to really, work on negotiation and keeping it private. So, if somebody's kind of got both of these type of attorneys they're deciding between, what are a couple things that you would advise them on between the two?
Well, like I said, an aggressive attorney isn't necessarily going to get you across the finish line and get you a better result. A diplomatic attorney can be a really smart way to go. That being said, it also depends on your case. If you have a hotly contested custody case where there's mental health issues at play, maybe there's even, domestic violence at play, or personality disorders, narcissism, that sort of thing, you might need a very aggressive litigation type attorney who has handled that specific type of case and gotten it across the finish line. And hopefully they're forthright with you about how much time it's going to take and how expensive it's going to be, because it is going to be very expensive. The other attorney, they might be able to approach it in a different way that does keep it out of court, but you're going to have to concede things and compromise and work through the process and the professionals in order to settle it. And it's going to depend on where you are at mentally and emotionally. For some people, getting that pit bull attorney is exactly what they need for their case. I would say that's the exception and not the rule. So I'm not going to give you a black and white answer on this one, but just keep in mind, every case is different, and you have to hire someone who ultimately you feel like is the right person for your case.
Yeah, I love that. And, a lot of cases are different, right? Like every divorce is not the same. So every divorce attorney, doesn't necessarily need to approach it the same, because if your situation's different, just like you're saying. So I think that's really, important and wise to think about, because you want to think about, well, what is my case looking like, and what type of attorney is going to be the best to represent me, considering what your situation is. So it's maybe not the same answer for everybody.
Look at that. It's a complicated process. It's not going to be the same for everybody. And that's why this is episode 45 or whatever of just talking about divorce. There's a lot that goes into this.
Yes, there absolutely is. Well, Bobby, thank you so much for all of the insight today. We are going to continue this conversation next week. Next week, we're really going to be talking about some of the nuts and bolts of understanding cost and retainers and billing and some of that type of stuff, because that's going to be really important as you continue through the divorce process. But if anybody has any questions, comments, any topics you want us to mention, please comment below or let us know, because we would love to discuss it on another episode. Thanks for being here with us today, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast. We hope today's episode gave you clarity and support as you move forward on your journey. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in next week for more insights and expert advice on the Illinois Divorce Guide podcast.